So just to introduce myself, my name is Louise Allen. I am the Education and Awareness Manager with the Crafts Council of Ireland. I'm with the Crafts Council just over a year. And I'm not actually, I have a total of 5 slides I've gone through 2 of them now. So I'm not actually going to talk for very long. But I just wanted to bring us back and refocus us in terms of why we're here and in relation to the Crafts Council of Ireland report Creative Pathways. And I think that it's a really, really significant report for many of the reasons that have already been stated, but also because it provides us with a benchmark of where the Crafts Council are now, or where Ireland is now, more importantly, in terms of training provision in relation to craft. And that's a really, really important document to have, because from this place we can now move forward and we will know how much we've progressed, because that will act as to inform us of where we come from. So the panel discussion is around the concept of developing creativity and innovation at an early age and the role of crafts in our curriculum. So just before my report, I'm going to introduce our panelists briefly. Then I'm going to just talk a little bit about some of the points that were raised that relate directly to preschool, primary and post-primary level education. Then I might ask the panelists to introduce themselves a little bit more in depth to give you a fuller idea of their backgrounds. And then we will be taking questions. And in relation to questions, if anyone has any particular burning questions at the moment that they know they definitely want to ask, there's paper in your packs. You can write them down, your questions down, and either Leslie, who is wearing a green jacket, she's at the back there, or Jenny will take questions from you. Please put your name and an organisation if you're attached to an organisation with the question. Otherwise, obviously, if we're not bombarded with questions on paper or something occurs to you spontaneously, we'll take some from the floor. But there is a radio mic, so maybe just raise your hand and one of the Crafts Council education team will find you. So the key strategic issues, and I suppose I'm aware that there probably is a little bit of repetition in some of the things, some of the points that are up in relation to the strategic issues such as partnership development, craft and curriculum, teacher education and support. But I suppose they have to be reiterated because they kind of almost form a thread running through the report in terms of key areas that the Crafts Council need to focus on. I'm not really going to go into depth talking about the issues because I think that both Helen and Finbar have spoken about them. But I do think in relation to the topic for today's discussion, it's about creativity, and I think that everyone will agree that children are inherently creative. And I know that there's a man that many of you may have heard of, his name is Sir Ken Robinson, and he was behind a large part behind the Creative Partnerships Initiative in the UK. And he would state that a lot of our education system is based on educating children out of creativity as opposed to into creativity. And I think that crafts provide a unique opportunity for children to have that creative freedom, to have that expression within an educational context. In relation to craft on curriculum, I don't want to assume that you all know, but a primary school teacher, when the revised curriculum was brought in, was given between 1 and 2 days training in that revised curriculum. So programmes such as Craft in the Classroom are fundamentally important because we really do need to be upskilling and providing the basic tools to teachers so they can instil the importance of craft and creativity to children at an early age. In terms of preschool learning, I mean, the Crafts Council has the opportunity also to develop something in terms of curriculum at a national level, but also even to talk to the county childcare committees in each area and to see what kind of activities they are engaging in. I know in terms of crafting the curriculum, I was actually just doing a little bit more research last night. People were trying to get me to go for a drink, but I didn't. Instead, I was just doing research. But I found this, and I was really, really impressed by it. This is a quote from the introduction to the junior cert syllabus for art, craft and design. And I've paraphrased it, but it essentially says, art, craft and design are fundamental to human existence, predating written language. They play a major role in human evolution and development. They unite in the basic human drive to shape the world for functional purposes and to express and communicate ideas and feelings. Their benefits extend far beyond competence to the development of important personal qualities, particularly those of initiative, perseverance, sensibility and self-reliance. And I was really proud actually when I read that, because I think that's really, really key, and it's the reason that we always have to keep in the back of our minds as to why creativity and innovation, particularly in children, is so fundamentally important. It's not, it's a human value as much as it is a skill that has to be acquired. And the other point that I really wanted, the recommendations, I suppose I picked out 6 key recommendations there as well. But in terms of raising awareness of craft and the benefits of experiential learning, I think that you've seen the benefits of experiential learning from the presentation that was made by Gina and by Marie and my colleague. But I really want to talk a little bit about raising awareness of craft, because I think that again is fundamental. You may have noticed in your packs that there's a number of career sheets that were just very recently developed for higher options, which the Crafts Council will be at next week. And if you notice that rather than saying the actual career, we've used the materials, so they're titled wood, clay, textiles, metals. And I think from a very, very early age, it's really, really important to reinforce that message about craft and to reinforce that message about materials. I think you'd all agree that we in the Celtic Tiger era at least, we've moved away from that awareness of where things come from and how they are made. And that is really, really crucially important to instill that in children, so that they know that a bowl is made from clay, and you can get clay from your riverbed, or you can, probably won't draw them away to be digging riverbeds, but they have to have that connection. It has to be made real to them. And I think in terms of developing that awareness of creativity and innovation, that would be, I suppose, a key message to communicate. So I suppose they're essentially my thoughts in framing this discussion. I said I was going to introduce the panel and I went right past that slide. I was a little bit nervous, but I'll do that now because I'd like to invite your thoughts on the topic. So we've Marie-Brett, and Marie-Brett has worked with the Crafts Council over the last number of years. She was involved with the Craft in the Classroom initiative almost from the very beginning, or from the beginning, really. Yeah, from the beginning. She is an artist, a craftsperson and an educator, and really has a breadth of experience. She's been involved in a number of craft-based programmes in Cork. She's based in Westport. She's actually also just back from the Electric Picnic, where there's a very, very large craft area this year called Green Crafts, and it was extremely successful. So Marie really is promoting that tactile engagement or that experience of craft on the ground. Lorraine Cromer is the Head of Education at the National Museum of Ireland. Lorraine brings a huge amount of experience both to the National Museum and to the conference here. Previously she was engaged with the Arts Council as the Education Specialist for 6 years. And then we have Aideen O'Reilly, and Aideen is the Managing Director of a company called Real Events. Aideen previously, or still is I presume, a second level art teacher, and many of you may be aware of Form Fusion Design Awards. But Aideen actually is the teacher who instigated those awards, and I think out of those awards your company Real Events grew, and Real Events, I'll actually let Aideen explain a little bit more about what that company is. So maybe Marie and Lorraine and Aideen, if you'd like to say a little bit more about yourself, and then we can go into the discussion proper. Thank you.
I started Real Events in the year 2000, which was the same year that I left my teaching job as a teacher. I had started Form Fusion in my classroom because I had a really bunch of transition years I had no idea what to do with. And I was also doing a Master's in Education in UCC. And I was kind of looking on the one hand of how do you get a bunch of unruly people to learn a whole set of skills, and then on the other side I was kind of ambitious, and I was thinking, you know something, our teachers need something along the lines of the Young Scientist exhibition. And everyone kind of laughed at me at the time, and I said, oh no, I bet this will be in the Point Depot in a few years. And again, everyone laughed, and then within 5 years it was in the Point Depot. And it was bigger, it had 15,000 participants, and it had 18,000 people come to all the shows and the Point Depot. So that kind of, when that came to an end, I could either go back to teaching or take what I had learned in rolling that out and apply it to other projects. So in the last few years, the company has grown actually as a consequence, and we're involved in the biggest school's project, which is Food Dudes Healthy Eating. Does anybody have kids in primary school? You might not. Okay, it's Food Dudes Healthy Eating. It'll make kids eat their vegetables, it really does. The Discover Primary Science, we also do the Engineering Week of Wonder, Irish Times School Mag, Shockwaves and Sound. We have a summer school of performing arts. We do the Power of One Good Idea, which is all about getting people to think about sustainable energy and getting into all of that. We do Health Heroes. We do the Department of Foreign Affairs Irish Aid Awards, which is about kids in primary schools learning about disadvantaged areas and poverty, and then kind of translating that into a medium of their own. So that's kind of, there's other things that we're involved in, but it's kind of taking what I had learned with Form and Fusion and applying that to other things, and taking maybe small ideas, small projects, and rolling them out. And that's kind of where I am now. It's a very misleading company, real events. We don't just do events, and it was a kind of in a rush I came up with the name, and I regretted it ever since.
I suppose I started in the museum as head of education last November, and I was really excited about taking up that particular position. And it was because it was in the area of education and learning. That's, I suppose, a theme that has run through my career to date. I started off as a teacher of history and English and humanities in 2 schools of Dublin, and I got a real taste of what it's like to work with very creative teachers, and the memory of that has always stayed with me. And while doing that, I also was involved in theatre and drama, because I was also a theatre practitioner. So I was teaching during the day, and I was actually nurturing my own creativity in the evenings in a theatre company that I had set up, working with professional practitioners. And I think that was something, that was a kind of an element of my experience that has always stuck with me as well. And after that then I went into arts management and policy making, and I worked in London with the Department of Education, Arts and Libraries, and I got a real sense of other learning institutions apart from schools, and the importance of partnerships as well in the development of creativity and innovation. And I worked with 12 public libraries in the development of their education and learning programs across a range of different cultural areas, because there was 100 different languages spoken in the borough of Red where I worked. And working with all those very diverse communities was just mind-boggling for me, and it was hugely interesting as well. And again, I always wanted to bring that experience of all these artists, these craftspeople that I met from all these cultural groups to other areas of my life, in terms of my career. So I came back then to Wexford County Council, and I worked there as a local authority arts officer. And I invited a number of those practitioners that I worked with in London to Wexford County Council to work with me and my colleagues in the development of partnerships involving individual artists and craftspeople, schools, and other agencies at local, national and international levels, and that was really interesting as well. And then as Louise mentioned, I was in the Arts Council for 6 years working as education specialist, and I suppose that gave me a bird's eye view of what was going on in the area of arts and education in Ireland. And I suppose it was when I was there in a part-time capacity 3 days a week, which was challenging because there was so much work that needed to be done. But I suppose again the importance of developing partnerships and joined up thinking between different agencies, individuals that were all working in the field of arts and education. And maybe I can talk a little bit more about that experience later on in our discussion. And as I said then, I started with the National Museum last November, and within that programme of education and learning, there's some very interesting work that we're doing there and that has been going on in terms of providing interesting multiple learning opportunities for schools at primary, post-primary level, and also for family groups. So thank you, and I'm delighted to be here today as well.
And to tell you a little bit about myself, I trained in textiles at Goldsmiths, London University, and a couple of years ago I went back and did my masters there. I work as a freelance visual artist in the UK, and I'm also trained as a teacher. I've worked in secondary schools teaching art design, and I've also done community development and group facilitation. I suppose to give you an idea of what I'm doing at the moment, it would span educational work and arts and health, working with groups, doing different projects and programmes. I'd also do centre art projects and also experimental exhibitions. To give you an idea specifically of the educational work that I've been involved in, there's 4 main areas really. One would be training, so that would be, as Louise mentioned, after the classroom, but also doing service training for teachers. As Louise mentioned, I'm based in Westport, so I work a lot with Westport Education Centre. Another aspect would be delivery. So I've worked with Port County Council's Arts Office for about the last 10 years, and each year done an artist in residence. And I specialise in national schools. That's my kind of elected chosen area of where I do residencies. I've also done a project with Port City Council just recently, an intergenerational project which spans 3 generations and is in an out-of-school context, an after-school club. I would also be on the Heritage Council's list of specialists who work in schools. Another aspect of the work I do would be mentoring and partnership, which is quite a new aspect for me. I've got a partnership with Port County Council and the Westport Education Centre called Following Glass. And it would be myself and a glass artist who initiated the project, which is now in its 4th year, which involves collaborating with teachers and doing field glass work in national schools. A big part of my role in that is mentoring with the other glass person. And I suppose Louise just touched on it there. The final thing is managing Green Crafts, which is an organisation that I run with my partner Nick Piper. And it's bringing craft activities, public hands-on workshops to outdoor events, creating a craft village. And we've just done an event with 170 craftspeople and crew and artists at the Electric Picnic. We focused on offering public workshops for under 12s and 20-somethings-year-olds. And that gives you an overview. My methodology is very much process-driven, and I suppose my specific area of chosen experience is in national schools.
Well, thank you, everybody. I hope that gives you a fuller idea of the various expertise that are on the panel. Has anyone been scribbling away, and do we have any questions on paper or any questions from the floor? Or would I just questions? I suppose, one of the key things, the theme of this panel discussion is developing creativity and innovation at an early age. So I suppose I'd like to maybe push the panel why you might feel that is actually important. I know we're probably answering a question of preaching to conversion in a way, but maybe some things that I haven't touched on in the introduction that are important to raise. So would anyone like to?
I think there's one thing that I have discovered over the years, both as an educator and as a policymaker and researcher, that there's still a lot of emphasis on verbal and mathematical reasoning within schools, and that I think that that human intelligence is about a lot more than that. And I think that we have to look at how we can address providing a greater creative education within our school system. I think that we do have a curriculum at primary level that is very exciting, and I've worked with artists who've actually said it is great, there is a great framework there, but you do have limitations. There are limitations in how artists and craftspeople can actually implement or realise that curriculum within a school system. So it's just something that I wanted to raise. But, and again, I think that whole thing of what you mentioned, Louise, about Ken Robinson, and his real interest in creativity, and the fact that we don't really address it enough within education.
Well, it is, and actually just at one of the closure days we had for Craft and Classroom, there was a teacher who stood up, and I think she's probably relatively close to retirement, and she was extremely passionate about the whole experience that she'd just been through. But she got quite annoyed, and she just stood up and said that, we're always looking at numbers, and we're looking at, reading and writing, and we're going to take the 3 hours, and she said, but what on earth is the point if we can't get the children to come to school in the first place? And what she actually experienced was, when this project was running, that her attendance level was almost 100%, and when the project isn't running, her attendance level is around 60, 50%. So, I suppose there's that as well as that there are many ways, I suppose, that we can be educated. but it doesn't always have to be hard craft, and it can be fun as well, you know, so it's just keep that in mind.
I think as well, if you light a fire in a child when they're young, then it might well stay with them through later years. They'll keep revisiting it, hopefully. If you catch them when they're young and you start the fire, I think that's really important.
Well, that is true, and I mean, one of the cross council concerns as well would be, you know, in recruiting the future generation of makers, but it's also in raising awareness or recruiting the future generation of consumers for those makers as well, and I think that's critical. So I think, you know, creativity in education is always about having, you know, 100,000, it would be fantastic to have 100,000 makers, you know, in 20 years' time. It's about having, you know, 100,000 people who are aware, you know, of that craft and the importance of that skill, I think, as well. Did you want to say anything?
Yeah, it kind of struck me when I was teaching, you know, where you get students come in and they automatically said, no, I can't draw, and they somehow developed this notion that they couldn't draw, or that doing craft work was babyish, and no, we did that in, you know, like in the early years of primary school, and, you know, that sort of element, and that used to really, like, I always had this, like, bugbear that art and design and craft needed to be taken seriously, which is why I suppose really that was the big driver with Form and Fusion for me. But it's also with, you know, like right down to parents. I mean, some of the most successful programs we have are also about, you know, educating parents as well, which can be done through the schools quite easily without, like, I know the school system is, you know, like there's a lot of things going on, the curriculum is quite saturated, but, you know, like to get that word home, and to, like, if there were packs that, like, kids had to bring home, or, you know, that sort of element, that has really helped, and as well to be teacher-centric as well as child-centred as well, because once, and it was interesting to hear about Gina's experience, you know, and also the marrying of the, you know, the craftspeople to the teacher, because if you can get a teacher excited about something, it's like the salespeople, you know, if they believe in their product, or if they get excited about something, like, they're going to carry that through, because, like, way back in the years, we used to do like hundreds and hundreds of workshops for kids, and we'd always get like 10 out of 10, and the students loved them, and everything from media studies to photography to, you know, like, we've done it all, and, you know, and we'd wonder why, you know, the next year, like, it wasn't kind of being upheld, and then, like, it was slow or something, but years and years I realised that, you know, when the teacher would kind of sit back, and I was that teacher, you know, if I had someone come into my classroom, sometimes if I wasn't totally engaged in it, you know, there'd be something that would happen, and you kind of let it go, and, you know, and you might have taken some interest, but if you know, a craftsperson was to come in, like Gina came in and so well engaged with your school, that makes such a difference, because you ignite something in the teacher that passes from one teacher to another, because teachers talk, and then all of a sudden that school becomes, you know, a sort of like craft-orientated school. That's just something that we've learned over the years.
I'd just like to reiterate that within Craft in the Classroom, as I said, one of the key elements was the fact that they meet before the residency starts. So all that problem solving, and then you do get that partnership. And I actually met someone having coffee who's been working in an arts project recently, and she said that she had been going into the classroom, and literally the headmaster the teacher shot out of the door, and they're being left on their own. It's a completely different atmosphere. What I would like to say is that you're talking about the curriculum within the primary school, and how you have all those elements there. One of the things that we found as a feedback from Craft in the Classroom, especially this year, was how much that craft was being used as a vehicle for integrated learning. And that, so you're getting children who possibly didn't feel they were very strong at maths or had no interest in geography, and they were shining without even knowing that they were touching on those subjects that they didn't know. And from some research that I've been doing, it seems that within the primary school sector, certainly within the UK, they're throwing out all their stats. You know, they've been banging on about stats for years and years now, but they're throwing it all out. And integrated learning seems to be the new buzzword within the primary school sector. And I, with my involvement in Craft in the Classroom, see that craft and creativity is a perfect vehicle so that you don't have a situation like you're saying, an overloaded curriculum, and you have teachers going, well, I can't do craft because I haven't got time. I've got to do my maths. They're doing their maths. They're doing their geography. They're doing their science. We don't learn anything in isolation. We don't ever apply anything in isolation. So for me, that is one of my main interests in using craft as a vehicle.
Actually, there's a really interesting example or model that I'd like to bring to your attention. It's Larkin Community College in Dublin's inner city. And what they've been doing over the past 10 years is actually looking at that integrative learning approach across a number of disciplines. And they've had a resident artist, Yole Bartoli, and she's been in working with all of the teachers across all of the different disciplines within the school in trying to apply visual arts methodologies in the teaching and learning of maths, history, geography. And it's actually, there's been phenomenal success in terms of the young people's development and nurturing of their creativity through that. But also the teachers. The teachers have said that it has made the teaching and learning of their subject areas more exciting, because they're now looking at different ways in which they can link in with the young people and different ways in which they can teach their subject areas. So I just think it's an interesting model that has been developed. And I know that Aidan Clifford is actually here. He's the director of the Curriculum Development Unit, and he did a piece of research on the findings that came out of that particular engagement of an artist who was actually full-time within the school, and that's really interesting as well. So that this person was a member of the staff, sitting with the teachers in the staff room, working with them, collaborating with them all the time. Now it had its challenges as a model, and it still has, but I think it's a very interesting one for us all to kind of think about as well. And they've got a really good website as well, and I can give you details about that afterwards.
I suppose I would like to ask, though, I'm aware of the Larkin Community College, and it has been running for 10 years, but how can we utilise the knowledge that's coming out of that, and the benefits to actually influence change? Because I think there's numerous models across the country that use craft and arts as a vehicle for learning and for integrated learning. And many of them have been going for 10 years or longer, and yet it doesn't really impact, from a funding or a resource perspective, across the board, either, whether it's schools or schools in particular. So I don't have any.
Well, maybe the development of local area-based partnerships is an approach, and as Louise said, the creative partnership model in England was a very interesting one that was set up, and it did facilitate partnerships between cultural institutions, arts organisations, individual cultural providers and schools. And it facilitated those partnerships to be sustained over long periods of time. And it funded all the different partners to sit around the table. And it developed their skills in partnership development as well. But it also enabled artists and craftspeople to work in schools, and it provided an opportunity to broker those partnerships between the schools and the cultural providers. So I think, I know partnership development is a very key part of your strategy as well, and I think that's another very interesting model to look at, that creative partnership model in England. Now there was one finding that came out of it, and it was that greater brokering, you need to identify brokers to develop those partnerships as well. And you need people who are actually, that have that expertise to match, you'd say, artists and arts organisations and schools together. So that was an interesting finding. But they did say that the young people benefited hugely from those partnerships, from artists, cultural providers, craftspeople coming into the classroom, working with the teachers. And the teachers said it provided them with huge possibilities for professional development, in-service professional, and on-site in the classroom professional development. I think that's an approach, and also the points of alignment, and that document that came out 2 years ago, that proposes that particular approach as well, the development of those local area partnerships, and that overarching partnership between those government departments that have a responsibility for the arts, for crafts.
Yeah, well, I think it's fundamental really that it's happening on all levels. I'd be aware if we had Norske Kunstnerbereich, which is a Norwegian agency, over in March this year. And Norway has a similar programme to creative partnerships where the government will provide funding for every child between the ages of 5 and 19 to engage in a minimum of 5 cultural experiences in any 1 year. And that's actually funded through their equivalent of the National Lottery. But again, that has been running since 2000. It's coming from government policy. And I know we had Gaetanen, who is head of youth participation and education in the Arts Council, on a panel, and she actually couldn't believe that the degree to which every single strata of policy maker, right down to regional or local authority, were working together in the project. And I think that's one of the things that really came out of that discussion, is that in Ireland we need to get that kind of joined up thinking and conversation, or more than conversation, going on, because I think we're very good at talking sometimes in Ireland and maybe not affecting so much. But sorry, are there any other questions from the floor that must be? Yeah.
Hi everybody, my name is Michael Flannery. I'm involved in teacher training up in Marino. Sorry, no, can you hear me okay? Can you hear me okay? Yeah. I'm stand up. Nobody will ask questions if we're asked to stand up as well. Anyway, just to thank you very much for the invitation today. I just want to applaud then the Craft in the Classroom then project. I was involved in a similar project myself, both as an artist and as a teacher, in Creativity in the Classroom. I think it was coordinated by Liz McMahon. But again, the secret to it then is a shared and mutual understanding then of both roles, the artist understanding and being informed by the curriculum, and likewise the teacher feeling that they can give a little bit in terms of skills as well, because some of the issues that artists in residence have in schools is how to organise and how to plan and how to manage these creative individuals as well. And you just talked about how some teachers possibly walk out the door thinking that the artist is fully equipped in that area. So it's all about the sharing of skills, I think, teachers learning from the artists and the artists learning from teachers. But one thing that just strikes me from the conversation that's happening here is that the argument that we're using at the moment then to elevate or to include then the crafts in the classroom is almost using it as a methodology for learning then for the other subjects. So I'm very welcoming of the whole notion of integration, if you like, and I see the benefits of that. But I think you should be stronger in your argument that basically craft then is another way of knowing, if you like, then, and we should be celebrating arts for art's sake as well. And that just in terms of, I suppose, highlighting that craft isn't perhaps then practiced or explored as much in primary school, just the argument of using it as a method for learning in other subjects, I just kind of think there's a little danger there in that we should be actually celebrating craft for craft's sake and not always just reducing it to a methodology in learning in other subject areas.
I think that's an actually critical point and a really, really valid and important one as well, both from a craftsperson's perspective, an organisational perspective and a school's perspective as well, because you know, in another sense you have to respect the syllabus and the curriculum that are laid out there, and a lot of, I suppose, what Craft in the Classroom as a model does is actually bring in the expertise of the craftsperson, not to try and act as a methodology for teaching other subjects. It touches on that, and that is often a wider project, but really primarily is on the skill of the craftsperson and the transference of those skills, and in creativity, being able to have that freedom to be creative.
It's a bit about a partnership approach as well, because sometimes, you know, if we go down too much the debate of is it methodology or is it, you know, craft or arts for art's sake or anything, you know, we might actually sometimes maybe lose sight of the fact that when the artist or the craftsperson goes into the school, it's that triangular relationship between the child, the artist and the teacher. And if that is planned properly, that's what I was really interested in hearing this morning in the Crafts in the Classroom initiative, you know, the amount of time invested in the planning, the collaborative, you know, collaboration between those three key players, that actually everybody benefits. The craft benefits, the child benefits in terms of the development of their creativity, and the teacher benefits in terms of all that they can learn. And I think that, you know, and I've seen this over the years, if there's time invested in research and development, in proper planning, then the craft works. You know, there's really good craft and artwork that's produced, and the process is really good, and everybody benefits. So I think that maybe that's just something that maybe to remind ourselves as well, it's that triangular relationship between those three key stakeholders when they're working together in the classroom is really important, you know.
I think I think the actual display at the end of that project in itself, for example, was hugely integral to that particular project, because there you had a celebration for art's sake. And there was a documentation of the journey in terms of children's learning and also evidencing how they integrated in the various subjects. But I think display is a crucial element of that, I think.
And also the artist, and I know Marie, when I was in the Arts Council, I remember talked about just the impact of this work on artists themselves and craftspeople themselves. And Roddy Doyle talks about it. It was his time as a teacher that actually inspired the kind of writing that he developed. And, you know,
I think it's crucial, like as an artist or maker, that you're allowed time for your own influence. So I think I'd be putting out, but I'd also look to receive. And it's like what you're saying, a kind of three-way triangle. But I think as a maker, you have to be very, very careful on the front. You have to be very careful that you keep putting out and putting out, that you won't get burnt out. So you have to in some way receive and give, and that's crucial, I think. And if that can often be overlooked.
Just a small piece of information, if it's helpful as well, just in terms of the initial teacher training, say for example, I'd always survey students in terms of their confidence levels, in terms of their own ability to perceive themselves to be creative, and their own ability to talk about art and to make art. And their confidence level, just on average, is around 5 out of 10 when they arrive into teacher training. An awful lot of students wouldn't have experienced art and craft because they haven't chosen their subjects in that area then for second level. And what I find, even in terms of the amount of hours that's given to visual arts, say in initial teacher training, it works out approximately 21 hours in theory. That's divided up then in terms into 6 strands, say for example. So I'm just saying in terms of craft, the amount of time that an initial teacher trainer or initial teacher gets in their initial training is very small. You're talking about approximately 6 hours maybe per area, you know. So there is a challenge there.
It is a real challenge. And also, if I can just refer back to teachers and what they said in a number of different research projects I was involved in, that they needed to be to have their own creativity nurtured and developed as part of professional development as well. And that's why they would often have welcomed, and would have really welcomed, an artist working with them, because they would have had a chance to, I suppose, develop their own creativity outside of the classroom as well as in the classroom. But this particular project we were involved in years ago, Arts in the Classroom Initiative in County Wexford, and it was a very much a partnership approach as well, involving the local authority, the Arts Council and the Department of Education and Science. And it was quite intensive over a year, where we actually had primary teachers and artists working in 4 schools, and it was a whole school approach as well. All the teachers were involved with the artists in this particular programme. And one of the outcomes was that the teachers felt that they had to be working on their own creativity outside the classroom in order for them to have an empathy with the child in terms of them developing their own creativity or having it nurtured. So I think that's...
So I was just going to say that's something that we've recognised with the project Fun with Glass, but after feedback from the teachers in the first place, they felt it was a real missed opportunity that Jane, the glass artist, and myself went in and just worked with children. So we now have a full phase where the teachers come and work in Jane's studio. They do hands-on work, they make work for themselves, they kind of explore their own creativity, and then they share with us their experience and knowledge of what's practical in a classroom setting. So we do part. But it's kind of recognising that the teachers want to make things for themselves as well, and that's really important.
And I think actually you're probably going to say that second level is very, very important as well, that there isn't any continued professional development training. Possibly there will be. I know Cardiff Harrison is in the audience there. He's taking over in the second level support service, and one of his areas is going to be the arts. But really up to now there hasn't been any follow-on training available to art teachers at post-primary level, and I think for them as well to constantly, for them to have the passion and the excitement about their craft or their skill, you have to constantly have opportunity to review that. It's really, really critical.
Well, I was going to ask this gentleman here a question, which I might just do first. Have you noticed that since the online option for doing in-service over the summer, that sort of craft or kind of like hands-on experience in in-service has like completely dwindled away?
I'm involved actually in the in-service both on face-to-face and online, so I get both perspectives alright. In terms of, there does seem to be a swing because of teachers' lifestyle, say for example, factoring childcare and that kind of thing, but definitely the online then affords opportunities that the face-to-face doesn't. For example, those that have a quieter voice, say for example in a classroom, like the online, because they can make their contributions online, their autonomous learning, they can actually decide when to go about doing the learning and concentrate. But definitely last year, for example, we found a swing, just to get out. The year before last, for example, our face-to-face, say, crafts orientation courses then collapsed for the first time ever. But last year we had, just this summer gone, that we had full attendance again. So whether it's probably a mix of a phase and then it would suit certain areas alright. There's one point to mention as well, is that the curriculum, the visual arts curriculum then is part of craft and design, and one thing that craft really resonates for me, that it highlights the importance of design in a very meaningful manner. So I think if we elevate the status of craft within the curriculum, automatically design will be elevated as well, and that's something to consider.
I think it's also the interpretation of the curriculum, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because something like the drawing strand, you might use pencil, you might use charcoal, I'd use willow and wire. So it's down to the interpretation of it as well.
Just to come back to the question that you were asking, sometimes, I mean, I was in teaching for very long, I was in teaching for 4 years, and but even by the end of the 4 years, I started reverting to what I knew best, which is fine art, because I was a painter. And also the timetabling. This is something, again, as another bugbear of mine, but often, teachers are specialist teachers, and they're quite often the ones that are not made permanent. They have the sort of EPTRs, the longest and all of that. And actually, at the moment, they're worryingly probably the teachers that are going to be let go first because of those factors. But your timetabling, like I had, quite often even at Leaving Cert, I had almost a half an hour a day as opposed to, and it was literally because art and design in the initial years weren't profiled. And by the end of it, it was because I was very local. But, it's very hard to do perhaps if you're not timetabling properly, if you don't have enough time to do it. And it's kind of, I was wondering, the 15% of students that took sort of craft and Leaving Cert, whether that's less to do with the fact that they don't see trendy enough, because certainly when, kids do it, it's great, and there's, like, you can apply design, there's so many applications, but, maybe it's to do with that either teachers find it too, because it's messy than doing graphic design, or, and it needs more time, it needs more classroom management, all of that, and then, maybe the likes of me who just, I almost went into my comfort zone after a couple of years because there wasn't any professional development.
I would agree with that. I'm a second level teacher and I've been teaching 18 years, and the CPD, I have to go and search it. And I've had no input from, professional input from the Department of Education, I suppose, in those 18 years. So we are crying out for CPD very much. Sure. I couldn't get caught there. Just to reinforce what Haley said, we're very isolated in second level schools. We're really very, it's very academic. The Leaving Cert, I suppose, junior cert curriculum is excellent. The Leaving Cert here hasn't been changed in 38 years. It's on the shelf for 10 years, and I'm getting nervous.
No, they are all very valid points. I mean, I know that.
But in 18 years, I haven't had any service. So we're crying out for CPD.
And I mean, I know there are various. I think NCAT is doing a number of courses at the moment, and there's the Art Teachers Association as well. So
that's right, and it's accessible if you're in Dublin, but if you're not in Dublin, you're isolated. And to get to Dublin, it's a big leap ahead, particularly in planning and smart care.
Well, I mean, that's really, really interesting for the class council here as well, because there's, potentially a meaningful way that we can engage in the future.
And just to, we had a breaking out exhibition here last year, and I brought my students to that, and I think that really helped them, junior cert students, that really helped them, because the work was so accessible to them, and it opened their minds. So from that point of view, maybe we could have more that type of exhibition, or if we could use maybe the craft display area to display second level work.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think one of the things that coming back to the report Creative Pathways highlights is there are so many areas. It is so broad in terms of the amount of work that actually needs to be done. And I think what the Crafts Council needs to do at the moment, or what we're in the process of doing, is sitting back and saying, okay, well, in the short term, what are the measures we can take where we're going to get maximum impact and be most effective, and then the longer term picture, in consultation as well. I think it's very important, and in partnership development, to see how we can really have an impact, both in the education sector. I'm conscious as well of, for makers who are developing a career as well. It's a long road, but it's one we're very definitely and very passionate about engaging in, particularly from an educational point of view. Now, let's go to questions. Okay, I think we're going to have about 2 minutes, 2 questions. So Conor, just...
Good afternoon, everybody. Just a quick introduction, and it's maybe timely in light of this lady's comment. Conor Harrison is my name. I work with the second level support service of the department. And since the 1st of September, my brief is to provide support across a range of subjects, which includes art. So the good news is, over this term, we're going to be putting a plan together to provide some CPD for teachers of art.
Thanks, Conor.
Jean Burns, I'm on the board of the Crafts Council, but I'm also basically an entrepreneur involved in social entrepreneurship and set up the foundation for design thinking. And I'm absolutely heartened by the conversation and the holistic approach, especially learning that you're talking about there. I think it's important that the conversations we're having in this room today goes out into the public domain, and as you're discussing here about partnerships, it's very important that we form partnerships the way we're doing it at the moment. It's equally important that kind of network of not just the Crafts Council, but society in general, and the different people from different areas in this room are trying to develop, that we elevate it really to a national debate, because as Lorraine said in the beginning, it does come back to core values, is what it is to be human. And I think as an entrepreneur, I have a great interest in entrepreneurial activity. And I have to say, the slide that Gina gave up there, if we were to do one thing and put that out there, that shows to me a complete picture. And a picture says everything, and the words.
Okay. I'll just take Deirdre's, and then I think we really will have to finish, because we ran over time. I know Dermot O'Donovan was due on 15 minutes ago. So Deirdre,
I think it ties in with that. I'm a maker. I did craft and classroom the same time as Gina. But I've worked in both primary and secondary schools, and I suppose both this year, both times I did them in underprivileged areas. And somebody said it there about attendance, and we're talking about teachers and artists, and us all networking together. And I think the point is parents. I found we had opportunities to exhibit the work at the end. We had one parent turn up at one event. One sister was sent along for another event. So I think it's not just educating ourselves and what's out there, but also to get the parents involved. I know the school that Gina was in, the support seemed to be just phenomenal. It was fantastic, but that's not the case everywhere. In my experience, it certainly isn't. And something like, for example, I think it's Art in the Classroom is a newsletter that's put out. Is it the Independent? It comes out monthly or bi-monthly. And that for me, because as a parent as well, is very, very interesting. And maybe some sort of documentation or something that can go out, whether it's with a newsletter within a school, or I just think it's very important to educate parents about what's going on and what's possible, and how important it is for children to be creative, whether that's at home or in the class.
Yeah, absolutely. I would have to agree. And I think Gina, I can't. I'm afraid.
Just with regards to that, I think the 3 key elements are that it be new, that it overlaps, and that it's exciting. And children learn in different ways. Some are much more academic. Some of them, it has to be almost like a goal oriented. So they didn't really care about counting all the holes, but they wanted to make that, and that's what drove them, and that's what drives us to actually make something. We have to have a goal, so they wanted to make this, and that's what made them count how many holes they had to do and count how many rows they had to do. And it's also that link that you said about parents and bringing them. I think I did have all the parents come out, only if briefly, because I know there was a match on, but they came out to see it. And one of the key things was, one of the children I remember saying to me, "My mother really wants to meet you." And every time I came in, she said, I asked her, "Why does your mum want to meet me?" And so then she went a bit quiet, she goes, "Actually, I just want her to meet you." You know? And it was because they were going home and saying, and then she brought wool, and then she brought this, and parents were wondering, what are they doing in there? And it is about being new. I think when you bring someone in that isn't in the school, they are new. It's new for the teacher, it's new for the kids, it's new for you. And so it doesn't get boring, because I get bored easily as well. I want it to be exciting. And if I'm excited every time I go, the kids will be excited every time, and the teachers will. And so they wanted to make this. They learned all their maths all right, and they learned all the hexagons, and they were looking them up when they went home, because they came, the next day they had other shapes that they'd looked up, But that's how they learned it. And I think children learn in different ways. And I think play is underestimated. And when you play, it is a process of learning. And you have to want to do something. Make it trendy. Make it cool. If it's trendy and cool, then they'll do it.
Thank you. On that note, I would like to thank very much the panel, Marie Barrett, Lorraine Comer and Adrian O'Reilly. Thank you for your engagement.
Thank you very much, Louise, Marie, Lorraine and AD for really a fascinating conversation around creativity and innovation. And I hope we get an opportunity to continue those conversations over lunch.